Okay, so we'll start. First of all, I want to say that I'm very happy to see everybody here. Do you hear me well? Yes. Okay. First of all, I'm very happy to see all of you here. We called for this meeting in these hard times for Israel. First of all, to be together and to be united, which is the most important thing in a situation of stress and of so much significance and even horrifying situations that we're going through. I said in the past, George Fowler, which is one of the founders of EFT, emotional focused therapy, before he was a therapist, before he was a psychologist, he was a firefighter. And he wrote a book about trauma. And he writes there that when you run into the fire, it's important not to run alone. And in some ways, we're running into the fire, and we're all together in this. And it's important to feel and to know that we're together and we're not alone. So first of all, we have each other, the Family Institute, your own family, your different communities. So it was important for us to get together and to feel each other and to hear how everyone's doing. Some people know people, have people from the South that were injured or killed. Some people have soldiers out there fighting for us. And we ourselves are in threat. So we always ask, who will save the savior? Who will be there for whoever is there for others? And the ability to be there for others is when we feel contained from someone else. And I think part of it is what we can give each other. In addition, part of the aspect of trauma is the feeling of incompetence, where you don't know you don't have the resources, what to do in a situation. And there's something in knowledge and tools and self-work which can enable us to be there first for ourselves and to feel competent and with knowledge and some ability, some understanding of what's going on emotionally and mentally and also physically to cope with situations that are stressful and sometimes feel like they're beyond our powers. Sometimes we find out that we have more powers than we thought. So we called for Stacey. Dr. Stacey Leibowitz is our director of the trauma unit for many years. And she also gave courses in trauma and psychopathology in the Family Institute. And this year we have 2 units of trauma. That means trauma is like on the go. I'll say just a few words of what's happening today in the Family Institute to whoever came in from alumni, whoever's not in. Today we have around, in the clinic, we have around 400 clients a week. We have 80 therapists and 20 supervisors. We have 4 units, 2 units of trauma, a children's unit and sexual abuse unit. And we have 2 programs, training and learning towards couple and family therapy, one in Hebrew, one in English. And they're both authorized by the Israeli Association for Family and Couple Therapy. So we're aiming to the highest degree of professionality from our point of view. And that is very important for us to develop therapists and to develop ourselves and to give the community a therapists that are top therapists, top professionals, and with the abilities to help others. We want to have highest awareness in the frum community for mental health and for the need for professional work with families, couples, marriage, and with individuals. So I hope you, first of all, will feel the unity that we have together today here, and that you will learn and feel like this meeting was fruitful for you. And I'll let Stacey continue. And I want to add that, first of all, if everybody, to be sure that you're muted, but Stacey asked that if anyone wants to ask questions, she wants to be asked questions. Maybe Stacey will say if you want them to come in and just ask or to have time for questions in the end.
Okay.
So thank you very much, and have a good night, and we'll see you at the end.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Micha. And thank you for that very meaningful introduction, I think, in terms of the idea of bringing together family or connection and using that and seeing this meeting as a springboard for that. I think that's a very, very powerful sentiment. I want to start off by just saying, just in terms of some ground rules, like Micha was saying, if people, I'm leaving the mute button in your hands, so to speak. I don't want to be muting anyone. I'd rather people feel able to ask a question or thought or contribute, but that also means you need to be responsible in terms of making sure you are on mute if there's a baby crying or you're discussing what you're going to make for dinner tomorrow night. So just be mindful of that. Okay. The other thing I'd like to add is that we're obviously talking about issues that we're located in the middle of an experience, I think, of profound trauma and profound overwhelm. I don't think any of us could quite have imagined the scenario that's unfolding and has unfolded to this point. And so I'm speaking about the topic of trauma, but that could also be sensitive for some people who are listening. And I'm very mindful of choosing the content in a way that isn't uncomfortable or triggering for people, and choosing language that is not too overwhelming. I've also tried not to overdo the content of this workshop, this meeting at all. But I want people to be mindful of their own inner spaces as well, and recognize how you're feeling and the impact of what we're talking about and how that feels for you. You also make the choice there about being able to appropriately self-regulate within this meeting. If anyone, for whatever reason, feels they need to reach out to me individually after this meeting or at any point, please feel free to do so. So those are just some of the kind of provisos and the ground setting the kind of space of what we will be talking about tonight. Okay, so I mean, I'm seeing
maybe one thing, just there's also an option to write a question in the chat. If anyone has a question and you don't want to start coming in, you can write the question in the chat. We will see it and we'll tell Stacey about it.
Right. So I think like if people can leave most questions until the end, unless of course it's a burning question where, you know, very, very relevant to the point at hand that we're talking about. All right. So my other dilemma with today was really, do I do a slide presentation or do I speak more kind of face to face with people? I'm still in a dilemma about that, even though I have a slide presentation, because I landed up doing a very simple slide presentation because I had very, very limited time to prepare this. So I think we'll maybe start with something of a slide presentation, but I really want us to have the personal experience and the feeling of connection. And I think that's the big downfall of going to slides, that sometimes we don't feel that connection. So I hope I can do both. Let's put it that way. All right. So the focus of what we're going to talk about tonight is really the question of how do we connect ourselves and maintain presence to ourselves, and at the same time be able to maintain presence for our clients. Now, that could be a challenge for therapists at any point in our journeys as therapists, but that's particularly so when we're encountering and dealing with the very same difficult struggles and challenges that our clients are dealing with. And so I'm going to share screen and go into the presentation, and then we'll see how that works and how people find that. Okay, sorry, let's go up. Okay, so really we're looking at how do we create support and safety for ourselves and our clients. And that's really the focus of today's session. And I think what I'm wanting to do is really consider how we hold a space for ourselves in a way that allows us to be present for our clients. But the challenge, as I said before, is that we are encountering an experience which we both, which is a collective or shared experience. And I will spend the first part of this presentation understanding and trying to explore the nature of the experience we're encountering. And then what I hope to do is look at how, if we are to be able to hold ourselves, if we are to be able to be present for our clients, then it involves us being present for ourselves. And that exercise of being present for ourselves involves us recognizing the tension between the parts of us that are functional, carry on, you know, make the kids breakfast, turn up for our clients, and the parts of us that are overwhelmed and all are feeling the strain and pain of the current experience. So, I mean, I've noticed a lot of sessions over the last few days really focused on emotional first aid or stabilization procedures in the moment. That's not what we're talking about here at all. We're rather talking about what happens in the long haul, what happens in the aftermath of the client, where the client comes into a session not feeling overwhelmed by the immediate experience, but overwhelmed by the sense of this trauma we are facing, overwhelmed by what they've seen on the news, what terror they're feeling as their own partner or child is drafted, or a fear of what the future will bring for them, perhaps mourning the loss of loved ones, perhaps the unsettledness of what normality, the kind of fragmentation of normality, and faced with a picture of ongoing conflict and uncertainty. So your client enters a room like that, and mirroring your client on the opposite spectrum, on the opposite side, the chair facing them, is someone who similarly feels overwhelmed by what they're seeing on the news, terrified around their partner or child being drafted, fearful of what the future will bring for them, mourning the loss of their loved ones, mourning the loss of the semblance of their new normal, or the kind of normality that they're having to kind of come to terms with now, and faced with a picture of ongoing conflict and uncertainty. So we're using this word trauma, but actually, what is the trauma we're confronting? And even, is the word trauma sufficient to embody that? I'm curious what people think, if people would like to volunteer their thoughts on what are the elements of this experience that we're encountering and that our clients are mirroring in terms of their own encounter. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's partly from the trauma of the unknown of what's going to happen in the future, which I think we're all experiencing. And for those of us who've been living in Israel for a long time, I think it's also previous traumas, national traumas. I know for me, what's coming up in a very physical way is going through the second intifada, and my body is very much reacting in the same way as what I went through during the second intifada. And granted, today I don't have young children, but I have loved ones who have, are serving on the front lines. And I think that, previous trauma is definitely sitting for me in a very visceral way in my body.
Right. So that whole sense of what you come into the situation with and how the situation layers or sits on our previous experiences is very much an element of what the experience we're confronting right now. Anyone else?
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Stacey. Oh, hold on, I can start video. Hold on. Hi. For me, in one session I had today with one of my clients, there was feelings of helplessness and powerlessness. She's in seminary, and the seminary very they ask the girls not to go out, and she feels very much like trapped. She said, I'm not even scared of the bombing, but the whole avira around in the seminaries is very pressuring, everybody running. And as we were talking about it, we got to the sense of just powerlessness and helplessness with not the ability to really decide what's good for her, what's right for her. And that's what came across. So
And I'm wondering if that also extends into the information she's exposed to, or what she hears girls talking about, or what the whole atmosphere of tension, of anxiety. And
it was the whole atmosphere of anxiety basically was very anxiety provoking for her, not so much the information, but more of she said a lot of oh, so now we're going to be locked down, it's just going to be like Corona, or I don't have the ability to just go out if I want to, I'm here, all of that, the others acting with anxiety was very much activating her own anxiety. And when we were going into just kind of trying to break it up, and I said, so what is the fear? And she said, I'm not fearing this, I'm not fearing that. So what is the fear? And when you start kind of trying to understand, there was much more of an understanding of what was going on for her, giving her back the ability even to just empowering her and saying, a day at a time, we can reassess whether it's the right thing for you to stay, even though you're a seminary student, you do have parents, and you do have a voice to say, this is too much for me. It's not a jail, it's not a prison, all of that, just breaking down was very helpful.
Right.
So that was her experience.
Okay, and it sounds like for her, the element of constriction or feeling confined, feeling like she can't control her situation anymore was very much a piece for her.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else people are noticing about the experience? Perhaps, what's coming up, or how you'd start to define this experience for yourself, or from the perspective of your clients.
Stacey.
Yeah.
Hi. So there seems to be like multiple layers. There are parts of a day that seem like just normal, and yet there's almost like a thick fog of tension and anxiety in the air. Just going to I went to a supermarket this morning. So, people are picking out vegetables and milk and whatever else they're getting. And then you go in line and you see somebody and they have a story. And then you share your story. So you're within this normality of a supermarket, but there's this thickness in the air, there's this tension in the air, there's this anxiety in the air. And so it seems a little surreal. Like, is this real? What's going on here? And so that's been my experience, and also for some of my clients' experience as well.
So this kind of tension between this, as you put it, surreal normality, and at the same time, this kind of experience of heaviness, this experience of anxiety and tension in the air. And it's at some level, that's what functioning in a situation of continuous trauma looks like, in the sense of, on the one hand, we keep going, we keep functioning, we keep moving forward. You develop a new normal, and at the same time, there's this other layer that's bubbling and kind of rearing its head in terms of needing attention. And that tension is that you've noticed, Joan, is really going to be the focus of what we're going to be looking at in this presentation primarily. So yeah, I think that part of the trauma, or the nature of the experience, is exactly that sense of these two things rubbing against each other. The sense of, and I'm part of like a group on Facebook called Imakadima, and there's comments there around, we're carrying on working and we can't think, we can't concentrate. I can tell you, for my own experience of trying to put this presentation together, it was heavy going. It really was tough in terms of holding the reality of needing to focus and be functional, continue forward in our lives, carry on as if normal, and at the same time hold the tension of parts of ourselves that are very overwhelmed. And that's happening at our own individual level, that's happening at the level of our clients' experience, and it's happening societally. It sounds like you're saying, Joan, when you talk about being in that supermarket, that it's literally in the air. There's like this sense of fog in the air. It's very hard for me that my hands aren't in the screen. I use my hands a lot, so they are being used, but no one can see them. Okay, so I think you're talking to this very awkward space which we found ourselves in, and which is kind of two lines of existence that we hold at the same time. And this place of this trauma exists as an interface between ourselves and other people. And our response to that comes from both our own experiences, like Aviva was talking, in terms of what this brings up for her. For me, this brought up an experience I had actually of losing a cousin 20 years ago, which also had a kind of element of kind of coming out of nowhere, this very brutal, kind of sudden, kind of pulling away of normality. And I think starting to understand the elements of this experience and the complexity of this experience is very important. It's not just, it's not sufficient to say, well, we go through the trauma and then we'll get to the other side, because unfortunately that's not how things are going to move forward. Also to add, as I think is becoming very evident, that it's the whole sense with your client, Revital, she spoke about Corona and how this kind of layered for her on top of her experience of Corona, that our experience of current events is based on our respective histories, as well as our position in that. Viva gave also a nice example of that in terms of saying, I was in a different stage of my life. I had young children at this stage. I don't have young children at this point in my life going through this trauma. And so my perspective shifts according to my role, my state, my stage of life, my positioning in relation to the events. And that positioning is some of those things are very practical considerations, like how close you are to the South, let's say, versus are you someone who's in a position of authority? Are you someone who's in a particularly vulnerable position? Are you someone who would struggle to get to your mamad because you have physical limitations? Or like our poor neighbors, are you someone who doesn't have a mamad, who goes and knocks on their neighbor's door and spends the day there, with their little children, unsettled and frightened? So that comes to speak. I tried to represent this in some form. It's like, again, a very crude, basic kind of diagram, given my time limitations. But what I wanted to point out to is that we come from our own collection of experiences, and our client, and in fact, everyone, I could have made 1,000 of these triangles in this drawing. All the people we interface with, our children, our partners, our colleagues, friends, all come with their own history, their own kind of peklach, if you want to call that, of what has brought them to the place where we now kind of step into the shared experience. And even in the shared experience, there are multiple points of entry and multiple perspective points. However, to go back to Joan's point, we have to consider how we manage our experience in order to be present. I put here for our clients, but I could have as easily put there for our children, our friends, our family. And I think part of that, the part of how we start to manage our experience is starting to recognize the struggle to be fully present, that there's a tension that we're holding, and the tension is feeling torn or feeling, torn is maybe not the right word exactly, maybe more feeling kind of landing, maybe even, like you land in a place of business as usual. You land in a place of kind of, getting dinner ready or doing the laundry or preparing, going to see a client. And then just as easily you land in an encounter with what it is that we are witnessing, experiencing, and trying to process and deal with. And so on the one hand, we carry on with our apparently normal lives. And on the other hand, we're grappling with multiple distressing bodily reactions, as Aviva pointed out, emotions that may be intruding on us, images, anxious thoughts and fears. Okay. Any questions or comments at this point? I see there 2 chat comments. Let me just look at those. Okay. Right. Okay. So there's 2 interesting comments. The one is around what about the clients? Like I have a client, strangely enough, in Iraq, of all places, and this client has no, it's not someone who's a member of that society, but it's someone who certainly has no sense of my experience of what I'm going through here. I have a client in England. These people are going through their own stories, and how do we then manage our own experience in order to be fully present for our clients who are not going through this? And I think the same process that we'll look at now would apply to those clients. The other comment was really about the guilt. Let me just look at the comment again. the guilt of going on as normal. And I think that comes to this tension of carrying on with our apparently normal lives. And on the other hand, grappling with these multiple distressing reactions. And these reactions could include emotions of guilt or shame, which come up for us in the moments of what we're experiencing as we go through this very overwhelming and terrible situation. Just checking the time. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay. So I hope I've made clear. Oh, I see there's one other question. Let me just look at that. Right. So the comment here is there's an issue around the graphic, intensely distressing nature of images that are unavoidable in the press. Right, and that comes down also to these elements of the images of distressing images. These are things that, and this isn't the focus of my talk. I sent out to the people who are part of my unit some basic tips and considerations on how to manage your own exposure. And part of, I suppose, connecting to your own distress is recognizing it. So it actually will fit quite nicely with the example I give a bit later of processing.
I sent it to the McCullough before. I'm not letting them leave the house.
Please put yourself on mute. I was close to what I said would happen. You know, what was I talking about? What we're gonna do for dinner tomorrow night? So, okay, all right. So let's move on then in terms of looking at how do we deal with this tension? How do we start to grapple with this? I'm just trying to. Okay, so this is just a statement I kind of put together that in order to function and effectively and show up for our clients, we need to provide space and nurturance both for the containing adult part of ourselves, the functioning part of ourselves that's committing to help us continue to function, and the overwhelmed emotional, I'm using this language very loosely, these adult part, child parts. This is certainly not meant to reference in any meaningful way IFS or inner child work. It just, for me, was a way of starting to conceptualize these parts. I think you could also see references to the way I've tried to conceptualize this in terms of Arno van der Hart's conceptualization of what happens when we deal with ongoing traumatic events. But yeah, I'm saying there's this containing adult part of ourselves that's committed to helping us continue to function, and the overwhelmed emotional child part. And both these parts need to be seen, heard, understood, and reassured. And when we embark on a process of providing space and nurturance for our containing adult part, and giving space to our own overwhelmed emotional experiences, we can then embark on a parallel process with our clients. I experienced that very directly yesterday in my own supervision, where I really felt that I worked a lot on my own countertransference related to the fact that this experience was bringing up with me the loss of this cousin. And for me, there was a lot of shutdown and numbing that was happening, and it really was releasing, and it really, I think, allowed me to even do this presentation, that I was able to really understand my overwhelmed emotional parts yesterday in my own supervision, which allows me then to be present for you and present for my clients. Okay, so that's a mouthful, but we're going to now break it down into looking at each of these parts. We're going to start to look at, so what does it mean to start to provide space and nurturance for this containing adult part? And what does it mean to actually hold and see this overwhelmed emotional part? So we're going to start with resourcing and considering what we need to do for this adult part. And obviously, I'm talking to you as a group of people who are generally resourced individuals and able to function more often than not from that resource part within yourselves. That, you know, you're all high functioning people, you're holding multiple commitments, as I see in my units, you know, people with big families, holding down more than one job and learning at Neve. And, you know, it's just really amazing the kind of functionality of people. But the current circumstances challenge the capacity of these functioning parts. And our primary role, I suppose, at this point is to recognize where we are at right now and notice the depletion of these containing adult parts. Notice that these parts are needing our compassion, our care, our commitment to resourcing them and work to strengthen and replenish them. So let's look at what strengthening and resourcing looks like. Okay. I seem to have not included another slide, which I really wanted to say. So strengthening and resourcing has two elements to it, as I tried to conceptualize it and break it down. And the basis of the strengthening and resourcing is really connection. Through relationship, through connection, like Micha said at the beginning of this presentation, both to the parts of ourselves and more broadly, connection with the people who can offer us containment, caring, holding, support, not just the people, but the experiences that can offer us containment, vitalization, energy, and support. Those external elements offer an avenue for strengthening and resourcing. So, for example, finding things which are hopeful and inspiring, that represents a way of using external resources to revitalize our own worn down, tired out adult part that's needing to kind of hold this all together when she is feeling so overburdened by the kind of circumstances which are depleting and sucking her dry. I wanted to share something which someone sent to me today, which I felt served that purpose. So I'm going to see if I can do that. I'm going to stop share on the slideshow, and I'm going to share something else. This video was sent to me as part of a group. A lot of the groups I'm on are also being quite disciplined about saying we do not share images, we do not share things which are disturbing or unsettling. There are images in this video of tanks, there are images in this video of soldiers, so if that is something that could be unsettling for anyone, please be mindful of that. But I want you to notice as you watch this video what it feels like for you. What does it do for you internally? And in terms of your connection, I suppose, to our nation and to the people around you. My limitations are going to delay us too much. So let's just play this video and see what comes up for people in terms of the experience of it. Mm. Okay, all right. So I'm just wondering, in terms of watching that, in terms of the experience of that, what was that like for people? I know there was no sound, but the images, what impact did that have?
I actually found it triggering.
Right.
Like how I was waving Israeli flags and being like, la, 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 they're going off, being helpful. They might end up dying anyway.
Right. Okay. So for you, it wasn't something. It's been sent around as something which is inspiring, uplifting, but for you, there was a kind of like, kind of this is missing the plot kind of feeling to that. By the way
Yeah, it's like everyone's being in denial. It's like almost like, yeah, like a joke, like a nasty joke.
Right, which is interesting because on the one hand, that it perhaps goes back to that feeling, that the tension of how do you hold the fact that we have to keep functioning. These soldiers have to go off to war, and at the same time, this is a kind of overwhelmingly disturbing reality. So that's interesting. Also, I think in terms of this concept we're discussing of holding those two, that tension.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Yeah. Do you want to add something? Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Okay.
Another thought that I had was the maybe the frustration or the inability to do something meaningful. So here are these young soldiers going off to war, and people might be saying, well, what is my part? What am I supposed to do? And then they hear about this one client I'm working with. She has three sons who have been called up, and another son who's coming in from America, and he's going to be in battle as well. So she said, I'm volunteering like crazy. So she has this excess energy, worry, anxiety. Where's she going to put it? And so maybe waving the flag, as much as that seems like, what are you doing that's so helpful, and you're denying what's right before you. But I think people feel inept, or there is a word and I can't think of the word right now, but just feel like, what is their part? Are they just going to be in the bombshell? Are they just going to run when the sirens go off? Are they going to, what can they do?
Right.
Impotent. I think there's a sense of being impotent, feeling like, what can I do? So they're cooking, they're baking, they're waving flags, they're doing whatever they can, as minuscule as that might be.
Yeah,
I
and
just
that's
hope there's
a kind of attempt at mobilization, attempt at kind of creating connection rather than the alternative, which is a kind of surrender, collapse experience. And I think the way you're describing it with your client, Joan, there might even be some desperation to that it's the kind of stepping into the overwhelming emotional elements of this. The reality of this is I only have you as Mrs. Eisen. I don't actually know your name. As stepping into the reality of this could simply be just too overwhelming. And so this is a way of buoying up that resource part, of creating a sense of, the external giving, connection, engagement kind of pulls us up under our arms, so to speak, like holds us up. And I've seen that in my own community, like in the last 24 hours, there's just been an outpouring of different initiatives and people doing this, doing that, collecting for this, collecting for that, driving, making, I think it relates to trying to battle against how powerful some of these overwhelming emotions are.
I just
would
hope that the
add
soldiers
to
have
that-
space to, be feeling what they're feeling, like for them to express their fear or worry or, because some of them this might be their last day. Let's not kid ourselves. War is war. And I just hope that with all this, throwing food and laughing and smiling and waving the flags, there's also space for the soldiers to express what's really going on for them.
Right. So I think that's a very complex question. And I don't know if there is space for soldiers to express their feelings. And I don't even know if that's the real part of things. I don't think that's even a possibility that a soldier can even truly, authentically engage with. A soldier has to almost go into this scenario of feeling like the hero of the flag, because if he actually had to connect to the overwhelming reality of what he has to deal with, I think he'd be running in the opposite direction, quite honestly.
Yeah, I was just going to add that
Denial. There's a place for denial. Aviva, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to add when I saw the video, because I also saw it earlier on somewhere else. All I kept on saying is, thank God, thank God, thank God, thank God. That's just what came up for me over and over and over again. Like today we have an ability to actually protect ourselves physically, which we weren't able to do however many years ago. And my son is out there like so many people around me. Everybody, I live in Efrat, everybody's been called up, everybody's son's been called up. Soldier in the next street over was killed. There's a funeral that's supposed to happen today. They still didn't get the body here. It's just part of our reality. And for me, seeing that is like, thank God that's our reality, because the alternative would be horrendous. It already is horrendous in terms of what happened. But
yes, right. So for you, that creates a sense of hope, a sense of possibility, that through this kind of external resource. Last comment on this. Anyone else want to share?
I was just going to add two things. One is I did see a post from a soldier that was saying we're going in with fear. And I was shaking, like I was kind of doing a double shake, shaking my head no and shaking my head yes when Mrs. Eisen made that comment, because they are going in with fear, and yet they do have to cut that fear out completely, in terms of being able to function as soldiers. They can't give into that feeling of overwhelm. The other thing I wanted to comment that came up for me is a sense of community, and that's one of our resources at this point. I was saying it to somebody overseas that all of these initiatives give us a sense that we're in this together, and there's strength for us. There's psychological, there's just emotional strength to having that sense of community.
Right. right? So again, the function of that external resourcing and the importance of that in terms of bolstering that part of ourselves that wants to cope, that wants to remain functional in the face of a lot of overwhelming and hard and difficult emotional experiences. Just going to go back to have I done it correctly? Is everyone around? Is everyone with me?
Yes.
Yep,
Oh.
you're good.
Okay, good. All right, so that's the external resourcing. And then there's a process of what would be internal resourcing, which is more of an internal connection to our containing parts. And but we can achieve that through top-down resourcing, which involves strengthening our thinking capacities, our ability to kind of be present for ourselves, to self-observe, to make sense of, and to hold and categorize our experiences. And through bottom-up resourcing, which would involve things like breath, movement, dance, I suppose even the action of what you see people doing, you know, when they go out and they wave a flag, that would be an attempt at kind of that one could understand as part of recalibrating the body's response. And I wanted to, let's just see how we're doing through for time. Yeah, I wanted to give us the opportunity of connecting to this kind of internal resourcing through taking everyone through a guided visualization process. So I think that's what we'll do now. And basically, the guided visualization process that I use as a basis also uses breath and grounding exercises in the body. So I suppose a lot of these internal resourcing processes are actually a combination of top-down and bottom-up resourcing. Okay, so for those of you, I'm going to stop the share again. We're going to be doing the guided visualization now. And for those who want to participate, you're free to do so. For those who don't want to participate, that's also fine. You know, just don't unmute yourselves if you're doing anything else. And you know, let's just go with this experience and see what it's like for everyone. All right, so I'd like everyone who wants to participate to just settle into as comfortable as a position as you're able to at this point, and just notice your breathing and allow your eyes to close. If you want to keep your screen on, that's fine. If you prefer to close your screen for this process, that's also fine. And just notice your breathing. Breathing in calm and relaxation, and breathing out any worries or concerns that you may be feeling. And as you continue to breathe in and out, bring your attention to the muscles in your legs and tighten the muscles in your legs and release them. Tighten them and release them. And once more, tighten and release. Continuing to breathe in and out, feeling more and more relaxed and at ease. And as you continue to breathe in and out, bring your attention to your shoulders and arms, and tighten up the muscles in your shoulders and arms and relax them. Tighten them up and relax them. And once more, tighten and release. Continuing to breathe in and out, feeling more and more relaxed. And as you find yourself in this deepening state of relaxation, bring your attention to the muscles in your face and tighten up your muscles and release them. Tighten and release. And once more, tighten and relax. Feeling your shoulders drop and your mouth soften and your cheeks rest and soften. And as you find yourself feeling deeply relaxed, notice 5 steps going up. And with each step up, you're going to feel even more relaxed. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and step 5. And you feel deeply relaxed and at ease. And notice in front of you a door. Take in the size of the door, shape of the door, notice the color of the door and the material the door is made from. And bring your attention to the door handle. And you're going to open this door and step into your favorite safe place. Place where you feel completely comfortable, at ease, completely relaxed. And in this place, notice what you see in your mind's eye. Notice colors and images you see around you. Notice what you hear as you find yourself in a safe place. Bring your attention to any textures that you may notice as you feel so calm and comfortable and relaxed. And perhaps you might even be able to taste something, or certain smells that come into your awareness. And as you find yourself in a safe place, connected to a feeling of comfort and ease, notice a path and allow yourself to walk down that path. And as you find yourself walking along that path, connect to a part of you that is resourced, that is powerful, that feels confident and able to cope and deal with the challenges that lie ahead. Perhaps this is a part of you that you've imagined. Perhaps it's a part of you that you've experienced at a certain stage in your life. Powerful, capable, resourced part of you. And create as full a picture in your mind's eye of this capable and resourced part of you. Feel yourself settling in to this capable, resourced self. And as you find yourself settling in to this experience of yourself, notice all the resources at your disposal. Notice and gather around you all the resources that you carry inside of yourself and that are available to you around you. And create as full a picture of this resourced and capable version of yourself, surrounded by this abundance of resource. And stay here for as long as you wish. And when you feel ready, go back to that place or that safe place, clear in the knowledge of the resources and the capacities that you carry within yourself. And go back to that door, down those 5 steps, and return to the room feeling refreshed and relaxed. I'm going to need to make a bit of a judgment call just in terms of the fact that this is a presentation. And I'm going to have to continue. So I apologize if that might feel a little bit disruptive for any of you. And just, I suppose, give yourself time to return to the space. And, you know, I obviously respect that as I kind of have to carry on a little bit at this point. Okay, I'm wondering if anyone would want to give feedback around that exercise or around their experience, thoughts about it, any kind of anything you noticed. I suppose that's the question. That's the kind of statement I'm wondering about here. What did you notice?
I can share that I'm feeling after that a lot calmer and also a lot stronger within myself and moving forward at this moment.
Okay, it's nice to hear. Anyone else?
I'll share. I think as much as I was really looking forward to helping, I think there's a part of me also that with everything that's going on is so tense or so intense that it's hard. It's hard for that to be part of my coping. You know, it's kind of like going for a massage and having someone touch just your most sensitive parts, and you kind of say, no, I don't want that. There's something about it that's personal and something that says it's too much right now to also try to calm all those parts of me when that's also parts that are helping me cope. The being more aware, the being more attentive, the more suspicious, the more, you know, that's part of my trying to keep myself and my family safe.
Right. So you're saying the alertness, letting go of that alertness, like
that calmness
is not something that one should assume everyone can do in this kind of situation. And I think that's 100% true. I've certainly experienced that when I've done these kinds of exercises with clients as well, in groups, other group settings, that sometimes you've got one eye open, you know, or
contrary. It's a contradiction to what, you know, I'm also telling myself I have to do, or it has to be part of how I'm coping.
Right. But there is a mobilization to that coping, and this is saying surrender, and that doesn't seem safe. And that, by the way, is part of the struggle sometimes with working with clients who have trauma histories in general. You know, I mean, obviously we're in a particular context right now, but yeah, I definitely hear that. And so there's a certain level of, and also trust. There's a whole lot of factors which would need to be in place, which perhaps aren't necessarily in place in this kind of setting. And at this time for everyone, I certainly hear that. Any other thoughts?
Yeah,
Yisrael, and I'll go to Esther. Sorry, Yisrael put his hand up, and then I'll go to Esther. Yeah. I'm not hearing you, Yisrael. You're muted now, you're unmuted, but we still don't hear you. Do you want to try do it on the chat, perhaps? And I will go to Esther. Yeah.
So along a similar line, I was in the safe place part of it. I was thinking normally I would have something that's a little more outdoors, a little bit more exposed, and I thought, no, this doesn't feel like such a safe place right now. So I switched it to something else, but something a little more fortified. But it was just an interesting, like, I knew that, you know, I was in this mode, but it still didn't feel right to go to that usual place that I would go to.
Right. So that's very interesting, and that's also speaking about how do we navigate this, you know, this kind of sense of normal and the struggle of what we're having to deal with at the same time. And it sounds like your mind came up with a very helpful solution for you, which is a very resourced decision to have made. very practical as well. Okay, let me see Israel's question, and then I might have to hold the other comments till the end. Okay, Israel's saying for him it was that he's wanting to say thank you and that it was really needed. Is that right, Israel? Yeah. I feel it helped to acknowledge the pressure and overwhelming situation with kids and the anxieties, burdens, and accept it. Okay, interesting. So for you, there was some kind of processing which happened in that process as well, by the sound.
Stacey, could I just ask a question about Bila's
Sure.
comment? Turn on my video. I just wondered, like when Bila said about the, being the more awareness and the being prepared and everything, that felt like some resources to me.
That's right. Yeah, I think you're right. And that's a helpful thing you're noticing. And yeah, you would want to reframe it for the person in that way and normalize it if that's how a client responded. It's certainly fully within the realm of reasonable Billa's response. And more than that, she's saying it's her defensive posture. It's her way of keeping one eye open, listening for the siren when her kids are sleeping. Like that's kind of to say to no, you can totally relax here and let go of that. Is not such a simple thing. So yeah, and I think it's important you could certainly frame that as a resource and a way of coping, because we're also in a situation not so different to the soldiers in a way. We wouldn't say to a soldier, oh, just like, it's okay now, you're in barracks, you can kind of just let it all go and let it all loose. At some level, we all position ourselves differently in relation to the stressors and threats we're dealing with at the moment. And Billa's experience is a reasonable one. And we could deal with that resource part in another way. We might say to her, where do you feel that part of you that wants to be on guard? Where in your body is that located? If you had to put a posture to that, what kind of posture would you put to that? If you had to put a name to that, what name would you put to that, so that it becomes a resource for her? And I think that's a wonderful point, Debbie, that it then becomes a resource. And that's often when we're working in situations of trauma response, we want whatever the person's strategy is the best choice at this particular point. And we want that to be part of what we give as feedback to the client or individual in that situation. Bila, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for pointing that out.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a wonderful.
I also think that it's more difficult to do all of that when I'm experiencing the same trauma as my clients. If I'm putting myself as a therapist for a second, also, that having, someone, a very experienced therapist sitting and being able to reflect, it's one thing, but I think what is unique or different or more difficult in the situation that we're in is that we're actually experiencing the same traumas at the same time live with our clients, which is something, let's say, that we saw with Corona, where all of a sudden, our clients would have never heard our kids in the background, even though my door is closed and I'm sitting in an office. All of a sudden, there's something much more personal, much more coming into the house. We're all trying to cope, and then I think it just makes it more complicated because we can't separate ourselves, or that distance that sometimes is necessary is less.
And that's why we need our anchors in terms of external supports like supervision, like colleagues, peer groups that can help stabilize us and help kind of ground us in terms of our own experiences. But yeah, it's very challenging. And when I was sitting here with one of my clients yesterday and we hear a noise that sounded like a siren and we both like alerted up, that's part of the experience. That's part of the reality, and I think it's that the client is aware of that as well. Dina, yeah.
I think this is an important conversation, and I think it also invites some thought about self-disclosure in moments like this with clients of how much do I share in terms of wanting to connect with you, my client, on what's happening. And yet I feel more cautious about that because I think in those moments sitting with clients, they need the boundaries and the safety of us being real people, yet being able to be there for them and not that it becomes an absolute mutual exchange where they might end up somehow being there for us, and that's not what we want. That's not the goal of inviting someone for a session. And I think it can be very tricky and subtle, but very important, maybe just in us being aware of that dynamic.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I'm trying to emphasize today, that if we can be the container, if we can build our resource capable part, and then that resource capable part can be the container for our overwhelmed parts, then we can start to, and that's kind of where we need to get to in order to hold a space for our clients, because we do need to be in the position of container for ourselves and container for our clients. But I suppose the point I was also making to Bill is perhaps we need to see that there's a container for us, whether that's our own therapy, our supervision, our peers, colleagues, and those kinds of relationships. I'm going to just finish off the presentation and then I'll take more questions. Okay, there's only one more slide left, so it's not a big deal. So yeah, as I was illustrating with Bela, we could also go further in terms of that resource part, like whatever it was that you experienced in that visualization. For those of you who found it helpful, we could have then taken it further in terms of saying, well, what name would you give to what you connected with in that experience of connecting to your resource part? Is there a place in your body that you could locate it? Is there a color you would give to it? We can take it further. Is there an image or picture that you'd like to, do you want to go and collect images or pictures? Is there a particular item of jewelry? Is there, do you want to model this resource part in clay? Do you want to represent it in some kind of body sculpture? We can really embody and kind of ground this resource part in multiple ways. And once we have done that, once we've strengthened our functional parts, then we can be present to contain and soothe our own overwhelmed parts. And from a resource space, we can make wise decisions regarding what of our parts need our attention and care, because that's also a question. Like there's a point of compartmentalization that needs to take place for all of us, and always does. Functional people manage to compartmentalize experiences. It's a resource to be able to compartmentalize, and so there may be overwhelming or intense emotions that require our attention because they will disrupt or they will unsettle. And there may be others that we might choose not to attend to because the risk of opening them would be too much, or we simply can manage by boxing them, if we want to call it that. And there's various imagery associated with boxing our own stuff. I actually didn't deal with that at all in this presentation, but the idea of saying, I'm going to put it away. I have clients, one client used an idea of a lake where all these memories and experiences kind of pool into the lake from the stream, and it stays held and safe there. Or the idea, a client I had used multiple images of like rocks, like almost a circle of rocks like you'd have around a fire. And then within that, there was a closed flower. And then within that was a yahrzeit camp. And that's where she held these experiences that couldn't receive her attention. But in order to be present for our clients, we may have to pay attention to certain emotions, sensations, memories, or images that require our attention, that need to be seen or heard. Like, for example, my experience of the kind of that this current circumstance really triggered for me the kind of shock of my cousin who passed away in this very traumatic way. And so I needed to go to that. I needed to feel and locate it in my body. I needed to engage with it and give it some kind of location in terms of my memories and experiences. And then now that we have a part of us that feels more resourced, we need to ask that resourced part, what do you need to do in order to contain this emotion, sensation, memory, or image? And how can that resource part be present for my own overwhelmed parts so that I can be more contained for myself and also serve as a container for others? So that's really, I'm not going to do this exercise. I don't think it's certainly not appropriate in a large group, and it's certainly not appropriate given our time constraint, but perhaps it's something to keep in mind for yourselves. I was mindful that this was not something I wanted to do in a large group, but perhaps it can give you some kind of pointers in terms of how to engage with the overwhelmed parts of you that require attention. So, just as a closing point, I'd like to say that really the kind of point I'm really wanting to make across this whole presentation is that in order to contain our clients' overwhelmed parts, we need to strengthen the vessel that contains our own overwhelmed parts. That's our adult functioning part, and allow our overwhelmed parts the space they need. And ultimately, by giving space to our own pain and trauma, which I think is what Mrs. Eisen was also commenting on as part of the flaw of what she was seeing, is that creates real stability. That creates, ultimately, that's what stability is around, that I can tolerate it, I can see it, I can contain it. I'm not afraid of it. It's not going to intrude. It's not going to kind of pop through when I least expect it, because I've created a container for it. I've created a way of naming it, and touching it, and holding it and containing it. So that's kind of all I wanted to say for today. I'm available to take more questions at this point. We don't have a lot of time until 10, but yeah, I'm available if people want to ask questions. No. Just with regard to, do we have a script of what we just did? I have a script for a guided visualization, a basic guided visualization that I use, which is more around safe place. And then I add on various elements. Sometimes we go down a path and we find the child part for the person, and we have a dialogue with that part. Sometimes we go down a path and we connect to the resource part. Sometimes we flip through the kind of different ages of the person. You can use it in multiple ways once you have the safe place kind of internalized. And it's also an indicator of readiness, because you need that safe place in place before you can do more challenging or work with clients. You need them to be able to connect to that safe place.
Stacey, can I add something in?
Yeah, please.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. I think it's just very regulating for everybody to have this forum. So I appreciate your courage and ability to be present at this moment. So one thing that you didn't mention, which I think is really important, and I learned from you in the trauma unit, and I used it today with a client who's feeling very anxious about sirens and living in Yerushalayim, a teenager, is the psychoeducation piece. And, just explaining, normalizing everything she's going through, normalizing the anxiety, the tightness in her chest, and then the feeling of exhaustion and wanting to sleep. And me explaining to her, how we can go from hyper to hypo in the window of tolerance. And, so I just wanted to give you nachas maybe is the word, that, you know, that is something that you taught me very much in the trauma unit psychoeducation, how important it is. And I think, yeah, we should just not forget that, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And I think the whole place of normalizing as well is very important, recognizing that, you know, this is a reasonable kind of response to
Yeah.
to the person's dealing with. So thank you for that, Maria.
Right.
Other comments or things? Dina, yes, Dina.
I think also I want to thank you very, very much, Stacey, for volunteering your time and being so willing to jump in and do this evening. And I think I'm feeling protective, perhaps starting with myself and what I'm going through, and my son being in the Army, and just feeling protective for everyone here, and feeling that this is the place that it starts with ourselves, and we can't kid ourselves that we're going through something just like our clients are, something huge and unprecedented, and the need for us to be aware, and even to the place of being able to say today or this hour, I cannot do this. And sometimes that's the right answer for us, is to be able to say, no, I can't do this today. I need to take an afternoon off. I need to take care of myself, and to do that from a sense of security and empowerment and pride, and modeling to our clients and to our families that no, sometimes we have to take care of ourselves, and there's nothing shameful about that. There's something that you can feel proud of and normalize it, as we're human as well. As much as we want to be there for our clients, we also have to be aware of our own humanity and our own vulnerabilities.
And I think that's part of being connected to self and tuning in both to the functional and the overwhelmed parts, is being able to recognize when, you know, when that's just not like you, that where you're needing to just step down, you're needing to give yourself that space. I think that's very important. Yeah. Anyone else?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. My question is a bit. So first of all, I'm currently not in Israel, Leibowitz, and for me it was, we heard the news on Shabbos, and we had another day Yom Tov, which was quite the challenge. On one hand, you hear those news dripping in, the numbers, and nobody really knew what was going on, but you knew something was going on, but you couldn't follow up. And it took me, the advantage that I had, that was at some point Shabbos afternoon, just before Shabbos, I caught myself and knew I'm going to jump into this pool of this news, and everything's going to fly. And I wanted to hold myself to not to jump into it. And I managed to make myself a decision. I knew there will be disasters and videos and pictures and images all around. And I told myself, I won't watch any of them. And I didn't. I haven't seen any of those pictures. News. I use a news website which doesn't put any pictures on. And I've read about what kind of videos circulate around the world, but I haven't seen anything. And it's a bit, for me, now, a contradiction between what you said and what Dina just mentioned, because what I did for myself, just Dina mentioned, to protect myself, not getting into this moment. But the other hand, what you mentioned is that to be there with the client or the DPME that have seen that and have been exposed to that. I just question where to put myself. What would be the right response?
Right. So I think especially in a situation where there's a shared experience, you need to choose the boundaries which feel right for you in terms of that shared experience. In terms of clients bringing different experiences to what you've had, or the fact that you're hearing, I'm not sure, your question could have many layers, but it could also, I'm not sure if you're asking, you know, do you need to be prepared, or do you need to have shared the experience of your client? Or is there also something in you being exposed to what your client's sharing, which could be traumatizing for you?
Right. So my question is more about the exposure part. Am I kind of like, obligated, something like, I don't know where to place it.
Absolutely not. No, you need to choose your boundary in terms of what feels right for you. You're certainly not obligated. If I work with clients who suffer abuse histories, it's really not my obligation. In fact, it's my duty to hold myself whole. I do not have to go to every course, read every book, and see every movie on abuse in children. It's really not going to be helpful to me or to my client. So I think you need to trust that boundary that you set for yourself and trust that that's appropriate. And just like any client can bring experiences which we may not be familiar with, we listen with an open heart and mind. And even if we've gone through the same experience, you saw people watch that video, and some of them it was inspiring for, and some of them found it triggering. So even if we go through the same experiences, we still need to, we can't make assumptions. We have to step into the position of the client, and from a place of respectful curiosity, if you want to call it that, try and understand what this means for that person. And it's not because you watched something or saw something that you'd understand that. It's because you really genuinely held a position of empathy and space for the client to share their experience. That's what allows you to understand the client's experience, not because you went through the same thing or you're fully equipped in terms of knowledge as them there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I'm not sure where we're at in terms of the process, Dina or Micha. If we would take more questions, if there are more questions. But
And I think also it's a role modeling that, you know, if it's time to end, it's time to end, and let everybody move on to the rest of their evening with a lot of appreciation, and just being here with each other, I think is also strengthening and supportive. And again, a lot of gratitude to you, Stacey, and to everyone for taking the time and showing up here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for everyone who was part of this presentation. I really appreciated your participation. And as I said before, if for whatever reason you feel you need to reach out, please feel free to do so. Okay. Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.